G'day friends and fans, and welcome to Dave Talk Stuff, Ukraine War Update for the 17th of September 2025. I'm your host, the author David Applegate, author of the books The Boyhood Arcade, Power Games, Into the Elsebound, and Neurotic Tales from the Empire. Thank you to all those who support the channel. I really appreciate it. You can support the channel through Patreon and other links, or all my links are in the link tree. Alright, so there's a lot of news about Russian oil production, which is actually only speculation. There's been nothing I can back up the media claims, and a lot of the media claims use the words like maybe and pressure from Ukraine, and of course, as soon as I see anything to do with Ukraine, I think you should too, is start to doubt the stories. Now, this story here, I can't find much on, but I can find snippets that both Russia and Ukraine, because Ukraine's a proxy, okay? Let's face it. Europe is pumping weapons to be tested into Ukraine. They are pumping long-range missiles into Russia to destroy the Russian, using the Ukraine war as a event to destroy Russian oil, to drive up gas and oil prices. Why? Because it'll hurt the Chinese economy. That's why. When they can't win by fair means, they turn to foul. And that is what's destroying Europe, is this win at any cost mentality. You've seen what the win at any cost mentality has done. It leads to the loss of life. Now, Ukrainian, again, an industrial site, which is unspecified as an undisclosed location. But, obviously, this is one of those quick fab buildings, as you can see. The whole copycat cut and paste style of the whole thing. It's made to be fabricated. This isn't a long-lasting building. This is a war production facility, probably to do with the announcement of Ukraine moving. What did they say? I think they said moving forward with the production of Neptune missiles. I mean, the V1. Victory, comrades. Victory over the Bolsheviks. We will have victory over the Bolsheviks. The V1 will terrorize them into submission. Of course, the fighting continues. Both sides use drones. Both sides have hit gas and oil distribution in tit-for-tat strikes. Both sides claim to have shot down drones. Now, apparently, Ukraine has claimed to have yet again struck the Saratov oil refinery. And of course, they will complain to the UN about attacks on our infrastructure. How dare Russia attack our infrastructure? Only we can do that. And of course, the Russians control the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, and the UN has actually reported that black smoke was observed rising from the facility, though they say there's no immediate reports of casualties or damage. They didn't go into very big detail. Ukraine attacked a nuclear power plant, and Europe is like, no, they didn't. Russian pipeline has cut output after attacks, and although these were temporary, the company said that the report, Reuters agency cited 3 new industry sources, but actually this is disinformation, apparently. May. And it has nothing to do with drone attacks, apparently. This is actually sanctions. Countries not buying this, but this is also, this gas and oil has been, however, what they're not mentioning is that this gas and oil is being purchased months ahead of time. So it's going to take months before this pipeline actually gets shut down. But it has been attacked before, and it has been repaired. Now, apparently, more military aid has been shipped. Not as big as previously. Poland, of course, is looking to boost its military capabilities in response to a growing threat from Russia. Of course, the Russia narrative is repeated everywhere. Of course, fueling all this paranoia has Russia worried that they will eventually get attacked. And that, of course, is the problem, isn't it? In that prophecies tend to be self-fulfilling. Apparently, Trump is still on good terms with Modi and thanked him for his helps to stop the war in Ukraine. Believe it or not, India and China both do have diplomats talking to Zelensky, who is often stonewalling meetings, but both sides, I mean, India has investments everywhere, including Ukraine, including a lot of Indian students, which they want to go back. Now, of course, India is also wanting to dump lots of Indians into the rebuilding of Ukraine. So, of course, Modi's going to be... Modi's the neo-colonialist power of the New World. Christine Freeland, one of the architects of the Ukraine war and the lies about Russia, who was a Ukrainian, by the way, helped drive Canada's policy to be antagonistic towards Russia, has now going to be a special representative for the Ukrainian construction. Of course she is! Corruption all around, it's in the DNA. Start a war and profit off the war. There's no crime. And it's only a crime when you're on the losing side. Ursula von der Leyen is facing increasing pressure from Trump to cut gas and oil, but she's also under huge pressure because they're not doing enough to end this war. Security guarantee. We don't have all the details, but apparently a barrage was fired at secondary fuel storage units. That's this nuclear plant there. These were 400 meters from the main fuel tanks, which are not... These are the reactors. But we're talking about grass and the secondary fuel facilities. This was diesel fuel tanks, according to the plant's management. Makes sense. They use diesel generators as initiators to raise and lower, to power the facilities and to power the control rods and power the pumps. so that if anything goes wrong with the reactors, they're not dependent on their own reactors to control. So you don't have a Chernobyl situation where if the reactors are unstable, you can no longer control the reactor because you're dependent on the reactor's power. No, they are dependent on an external power source to control the reactors. So power goes in to run the facility, but all the facility's power is churned out. Fire's been contained. Nothing went near the secondary fuel. These buildings down here, probably the bunker-type buildings, nowhere near the fire. It's grass is huge buffer zone between the two. But again, it's just Ukraine effing around, but they can do so because America and Europe won't do anything about Zelensky and his reckless behaviour. And speaking of Zelensky and his reckless behaviour, the Mirotvorets website has allegedly post those who threaten national security of Ukraine. And they have now gone after a 2018 Russian figure skater. Apparently, they call it they call themselves peacekeepers, but what have they done? Journalists, artists, politicians who visit Crimea or Donbass or drew criticism. Zagitova is a silver medalist in the 2018 Olympics, and I think this is personal. I think she turned down one of the corruptocrats in Ukraine. This is a common problem with autocratic rulers, especially long-entrenched rulers of countries who think they can snap their fingers and make actresses, and sporting figures bow to their sexual desires. Normally, people would point to say, it's Putin who did it. But this is Ukraine we're talking about. And a lot of people, again, turn a blind eye to Ukraine's more infamous, diabolical actions. Russian air defense claims to shut down 357 Ukrainian unmanned vehicles. This is a huge escalation by Ukraine. If the numbers are correct, because normally it's in the hundreds, not this high. Oh, wait. Damn it. Sometimes when you click the... Alright. Yeah, I was going to get to this last and I forgot to put it up there. I'm sorry. Alright. So... obviously, there are zealots around the world, and this is a problem, particularly when you ignore domestic terrorism. You end up with situations where one side commits all the violence, but then they blame all the violence on the other side. Victim blaming. Like Destiny, the YouTuber Destiny, victim blaming Charlie Kirk. Actually, is he a YouTuber or is he on... No, Twitch. Wait, so we have another story about Zelensky losing touch with reality. Now, these have popped up before. His closest advisors, some of whom have stepped down, some under mysterious circumstances were fired without reason or cause. Zelensky has often mixed. He keeps calling it reshuffling, but he's changed government and ministers and generals like most people change socks. Every time a offensive goes wrong, you'll soon find that Ukraine has yet another new general, and nobody knows where the others go, although some of the more famous ones end up as foreign diplomats. But sources in Kiev have told Western media that there's been a lot of infighting, and that there's a new draft law to impose sentences for military insubordination, which has been described as draconian laws, where people have to be jailed up for 12 years by ignoring orders from the army, even if you're not in the army. So any order from Zelensky is considered a military insubordination. So if you don't obey a direct order, or you don't show up for a draft, and activists have been seen in Ukraine protesting that army service is not slavery. Vigils have been banned because they have been seen as pro-Russian or sympathizing with the enemy. They didn't call them the enemy, called them the invaders. The invaders. Man, I've got to get me some Zelensky clips, but actual speeches by Zelensky seem to be AI generated, where you have just the talking head, behind the Ukrainian flag, which looks so CGI it's not funny. Although a lot of the time it's actually because they're made of silk and they're being polished with what's that stuff? They often use it on suits, but it's actually toxic. Now, give that sheen, artificial. They call it shine. They call it shine. That's it. It's actually literally called shine. It's like Brasso. Don't get it on your skin, folks. Don't breathe near it. All right. Now, martial law restrictions apparently have been restricted for some young men to leave Ukraine so they can go to Poland and be slaves for the state. I mean, allegedly. But martial law for some still exists. And there is a lot of confusion because there seems to be an overlap in the age where some 18 to 22-year-olds can leave, while martial law previously banned 18 to 60. It's still with permission, and they still control the numbers, and they admit that people leaving Ukraine has contributed to Ukraine's long-standing demographic problems, which predate 2014, which they often blame on Russia. Because up until 2014, between 1990 and 2014, a quarter of the Ukrainian population left, mostly to Russia and Belarus to work. Some went to Poland and Romania. But since 2014, large numbers of Ukrainians, maybe around 3 million, have left Russia and Belarus, but haven't returned to Ukraine. And half the Ukrainian refugees, apparently in Europe, have been relocated to Canada well, they said North America, but investigations seem to point to most of them going to Canada, some being relocated to the United States, and so they basically go to the UN, and after a while they say, "Nah, we're not going back," and Ukraine is quite pissed off. But several courts in Europe have confirmed that Europe won't force and cannot, by law, force anybody to return to a war zone. So if Zelensky wants to fix his Ukrainian problems, he has to end the war. So it's actually against his own interest to keep not talking to Russia. Yet Zelensky keeps refusing to talk to Russia. Public trust has slumped by 7%, allegedly standing at 58%. Many claim it's much lower than that. But Ukrainian power brokers, of course, have been meeting to find a replacement. This is no secret. You can find this sometimes in Politico and Axios, mostly in Reuters. However, what they don't tell you is that every time they find a replacement, something happens to the replacement. They either end up in jail or they end up slipping on a knife and getting shanked 3 times. Or, like the one in Spain, getting shot by a guy in a tracksuit who was suddenly motivated by patriotism for Ukraine. Yeah, suddenly motivated by $100,000, more likely. Allegedly. Because they've actually never proven that he got $100,000 from Ukraine. And they seem to have wandered off. There doesn't seem to be any evidence they arrested anybody or interviewed anybody. Then, of course, there's evidence that he went to the Ukrainian embassy straight from the assassination and was returned to Ukraine. The socialist government of Spain has been no help with European authorities. What a shock. But weapons of desperation. How often have I said the closer you get to the end of the war, you start to see weapons of desperation. This is where you buy the biggest rockets, throw the biggest rockets at the enemy, and often the biggest weapons are the worst. While America standardized itself with 16.1-inch naval guns, that was after years of testing, by the way, Japan decided to go with the Yamamoto 18-inch guns, untested with unprecedented range. There was only one problem. In field tests, these guns worked perfectly normal. But however, the guns were not mounted on a ship. They routinely created massive shockwaves which caused trouble to the Yamamoto to the point where its successive shells were so inaccurate that they might as well been throwing darts blindfolded. The explosions by these shells were impressive compared to the size of the ship. The ship from the air, the ship looked like like the size of your thumb, and there's this huge nearby plume that rises, a huge shockwave that rises out of the water. But because they could tell the incoming projectile from the flare of they could actually zig and zag and pretty much exhaust the Yamamoto's big guns because they wouldn't wait for optimal firing. And it turned out the bigger the missile, right, may have greater range. Same with artillery shells. The bigger the artillery shell may have greater range, but they're more effective at mid-range. So you don't actually want to fire them at long range. And you don't want to fire them incidentally. Okay? You don't want to fire a big missile at small targets. This is why Japan ran into production issues of artillery shells. They could have actually made 1,000 planes, which would have done way more devastation. Japan could have fought America to a standstill if they hadn't invested in the Yamamoto. Now we have Russia investing in big missiles and Ukraine investing in big missiles. And we have foreigners on both sides in getting their sticky, grubby fingers into the war to ship in weapons and have them tested. Now, the problem with big missiles is, they might be destructive to a target, but you have hundreds of targets, and you can't. And the more missiles you accumulate, and more missiles on each side, you just waste more resources. And most big missiles aren't going to make it to target. You are better off with lots of small drones, just like America used lots of small fighters in World War II. Lots of medium tanks in World War II. Russia sort of has learnt some mistakes from deploying too many heavy tanks into Ukraine. But they don't have a tank that's a game changer. There's both. We're now so long into anti-tank technology, we're almost making tanks useless on the battlefield as anything other than support artillery. So we're going to see ATACMS and variants. We're going to probably see more of the bigger Russian missiles. Will we see the much bigger missiles being used again, like the Oryx? That's apparently also... we're seeing an increase in production of the Hilsnurny missile. This is a liquid-fueled big missile. Like, hey, guy's standing there, like, this is huge, right? And, yeah, this is a missile. They're testing a small batch right now. This is basically to give the Iskander more range. They basically put it on this big bad boy, launch it up there, can carry multiple. It's probably up to 10 inside that cone. And 10 of these. And basically launched them. And of course, Ukraine is doing its Neptune, the V1 missile. Longer wings and a solid fuel booster. French, longer wings, compact turbo engine, German, The Neptune missile, Again, these various systems, of course, in various stages of production. There you go. There it is. It's basically they've taken the British missile, put some V1 wings on it, put a V1 rocket booster on it. Because originally this was a freefall missile. Basically, this was basically designed to be a glide bomb originally. Okay, it wasn't designed, but they put strapped rockets and wings onto basically something was dropped from probably from a B1 or a B2 that would basically just come down and you basically use free fall. It was a massive free fall that was called a cruise missile or a cruise bomb because it did have some guidance, but it's a free fall, a glide bomb. But there are not many multiple systems. Poland, of course, is testing weapons. Who else? Russian, Ukrainian, and Polish. Of course, Polish and UK. UK's got its finger in every pie. So have the Germans. But Poland won't talk about this case anymore. It's going away. They're trying to make this case disappear. Remember those Russian drones, those 19 Russian drones? Well, Polish police made arrest of a 21-year-old Ukrainian and a 17-year-old Belarusian woman. 17-year-old woman? No, right? 20-year-old groomer and his 17-year-old underage victim, whose status in Poland seems to be illegal. So there's probably a lot of Belarusians in Poland illegally, along with a lot of Ukrainians. But apparently they were in the middle of a large-scale spy investigation, but as soon as they found out their target was a Ukrainian, this whole incident goes away. And all we get now is NATO claiming that at least 19 Russian drones entered airspace, despite Moscow's insistence that the Russian UAVs on display don't have the range to reach Polish territory. And that Europe is stoking fear to justify its military spending. So we have a case of a security breach by a Ukrainian caught flying drones, investigated by Polish police, arrested, and then the whole case disappears. Russia is now accusing Poland of staging the whole drone incident, that they have come up with nothing but a couple of drones in a field without actual evidence that they came from Russia, and again accuses them of pushing an anti-Russian narrative pushed by Brussels, just like how they lied about the Nord Stream pipeline, which they're keen to not resolve as well. Now, recently, the Organization for Human Rights talked about civilian deaths in Ukraine actually exceeding military deaths. That's a story that disappeared. But further research has at least led me to this, where we are talking about cluster munitions and civilian deaths. Now, Ukraine claims that there are only 1,200 casualties. How do we know this is true when it's not from an independent source? Now, it is being repeated by Swiss, but the source of the actual research, again, was done by Ukrainian officials. Ukraine, of course, blames Russia, but further research has actually shown that both sides are using cluster munitions. They're claiming that particularly Russia causes civilian deaths, according to the left-leaning landmine and cluster munition monitor, who actually hasn't been to Russia or Ukraine, but just merely going off governmental reports from Ukraine. And so, yeah, it's not an unbiased report. Attacks have killed dozens of civilians and left hundreds of injured. But again, they're not saying the context of where or when. Nor do they actually mention that so often Ukraine seeds fields nightly with cluster munitions. And why are there civilians on the battlefield and conflict zone in the first place? You can't blame Russia, okay? We actually do see Ukraine putting out reports that people allegedly are evacuated when Russian troops advance. Now, experts say a lot of the ammunition, it's actually not because they're deliberate cluster munitions, but they're saying that a lot of these unexploded ordnance are actually Ukrainian mortars. Apparently, they've had a huge problem with batches of mortars from Poland with poor fuses, or they or deliberately changed the fuse from impact to proximity to launch cluster munitions at short range into the Russian lines. The Russians, of course, one of the reasons why their advance is so slow in some areas, in a leaked memo, Putin apparently asked why was there a slow advance in that, and it was redacted. And the answer apparently from redacted was that the unexpected volume of unexploded munitions, that they're scattered in such a way that they defy normal clearing methods. Normal clearing methods for Russia is to basically send out strings of send out a rocket with a long cord attached to the back and a detonator cord and detonate it. But these cluster munitions, because they're partially buried and they have a shock-resistant fuse, they don't detonate because they use gel C4, which is very high shock-resistant. This is deliberate. But Ukraine, of course, denies tampering or deliberately seeding munitions. They say they just use munitions provided, and they do get provided cluster munitions by the United States. 5 times, according to the War Department, though some say 7. Some media outlets. Apparently, they transitioned through Germany, who is allegedly party to the convention. There's been no new transfers under President Trump. So any cluster munitions that came to Ukraine came under Biden, apparently. Although there probably a few came sooner. Now, apparently it's the same, not just these cluster munitions, but these, what they call an aerial mine. Though it's actually not, an aerial deployed mine, I should say. They basically drop mines onto a field. Ukrainian captured a man from Kenya fighting for Russia. Though it doesn't. That's actually a war crime. You don't put your POWs on display, man. Like, they're not trophies. They're human beings. Ukraine, doesn't see it that way. And again, European Courts of Human Rights, hear no evil, see no evil when it comes to Ukraine. Again, fighting in the buffer zone. Nothing really of consequence, although there was a lot more fighting than usual. Russia's made no headways. Apparently this is where the Ukrainians captured a Kenyan. Fighting in Kupiansk continues. No change to the status since yesterday. Now we go to north of Lyman, where there is some change, but not much. But still it's significant compared to other battlefield areas, where they are now on Strazivsky and fighting towards Lyman, which doesn't rule out a surge to Lyman, but basically a threat. They only need to advance a few kilometres to be a threat to Lyman using Izun and Lyman using heavy artillery, and basically put the Ukrainians here at risk of having supplies cut. Now we have fighting north of Chevas Yar, though nothing really substantial. We have a little bit of movement at Chevas Yar, but not much. Again, we have a little bit of movement here at Kuroska, but it's not much. We have a little bit of movement, actually a significant movement, but smaller than the movement at Lyman. But still, we have significant movement. Little movement in Novokuznetsky, but most of it is more of the same. The Russians are now starting to be bogged down, and they've made it clear their strategy is to take out this Zelensky line to weaken this, which has believed to have up to 200,000 Ukrainian defenders, pretty much keeping a third of the Ukrainian army out of the rest of the war, enabling Russia to take land in other areas. As you can see, they're encircling this area here, pushing the Ukrainians out with very little room to retreat should they be overrun. Seems to be an increasing Russian tactic to cauldron the Ukrainians. They, of course, are pushing on Donetsk without action, and regular fighting over the road to Zaporozhye continues. We have how recent, 4 hours ago, another explosion in Donetsk. Again, Ukraine attacking civilian targets, not military targets. A common tactic of Ukraine, which unfortunately the Western media hear no evil, see no evil. But of course we have, again, this is a repeated story. We don't have anything new, though apparently critical infrastructure was destroyed in other cities. But again, Ukraine says, we took out 136 of 174. And again, most of them are fixed-wing surveillance, not actually attack drones. So whenever Ukraine says, we took down 136 attack drones, but then you go, wait a minute, the fixed-wing observation drone, is it also a tech drone? Is it? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But Ukraine doesn't come up with pictures, and the ones we can find in the Russian Drone Museum don't carry arms, because to be a long-range, the 60-kilogram payload of a strike pack reduces the range of the drone severely. A lot of the drones, particularly the so-called kamikaze drones, they're carrying a light pack. They're like only a couple of kilograms. They're like bombs. They're basically there to basically cause damage over time, disrupt production, particularly in drone production, particularly if they can hit an ammo depot, because ammunition tends to be its own worst enemy. You only need a few grenades to set off an ammunition dump, whereas a factory, you need lots of bombs to do significant damage. But of course, Ukraine is hopefully going to come to its senses. I mean, Trump has put pressure on them on both sides to meet soon. We haven't got any European meetings. We haven't got any. We had JD Vance announce that they've made headway with the security guarantees. That apparently the draft has been presented to Brussels. There's supposed to be a meeting. I think because some of these meetings are so high level that we're only getting suggestions that they're going to meet, and then they just lapse and not report the meetings because they don't want to help the Russians, or some other. No, they don't. It's the public they want misinformed. It's the public they want. See, the more uninformed people are, the more people will make up stories and start to panic about what are they doing about the Russians. They're not doing anything about the Russians. What are the Russians up to? They basically want people to make stuff up in their heads and start to panic. This war is burning out, and yet we can bring it to a close sooner with just a little bit of pressure from the United States on Zelensky to accept a freeze on the battlefield. And then if Putin breaks it, then it's full sanctions package. It's that simple. But unfortunately, nothing's ever that simple in politics because there are too many people who want war. So thank you for listening. Please like, share, subscribe, and please support the channel. You can support me on Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. All my links are in the link tree, description below, in my profile, or scan the QR code on the screen. Thank you. See you in the next video. Stay safe. Appreciate each and every one of you. Bye for now.